Good morning, everybody. I'm Ann Christensen, a licensed prayer practitioner at Light on the Mountains. And now it is time for all of us to take a deep breath, especially me, and let go of everything it took to get here. And go within. I know that there is one universal spirit, one infinite intelligence, one divine presence, one creative force. That force, that presence, that intelligence, that spirit is right here, right now, within each one of us. But it's within everything in the universe. It is what is, and we are what we are, and we are all one spirit. And I am so grateful for that knowledge and for this philosophy that teaches this wonderful stuff. And I give thanks for that, and I give thanks for Light on the Mountains and for all the people that make it work, the people in the kitchen, the people putting out food, everybody, and especially for our wonderful music and our special music today, and for Reverend John and his always perfect message, and for each one of us who is here today and each one who's out there on the web. And I give thanks, and together we say, and so it is. This morning, yesterday, I started looking at the April magazine. It is superb, and I highly recommend it. And the reading today is going to be from it, because as Reverend John's blog this week was about vulnerability, and the April, what do you call it? The April theme is vulnerability, and the theme of this magazine is vulnerability. So I didn't have to go far to find something to read. But it's here, and if I can get my glasses on, thank you. What I'm reading, which is one of the first things I always read in the magazine, is the one page by the leader, the spiritual leader of Centers for Spiritual Living. I think this may be Dr. Viljean's last one, because his time is up, and they have to write ahead of time. And what he wrote, he entitles, he, by the way, is the minister at Santa Rosa CSL, and has been, I think it's for the last, is it 3 years, John?
About 23.
Yeah. No. Has he been his time as spiritual leader? Yeah, about 3 years. That's what it feels like. Okay. Sorry. Anyway, he has been the spiritual leader for all of us for 3 years. And this is, I'm going to, I think I'm going to have to repeat things in here, because it's hard for me to take them in to my brain just reading them once. And he says, science of mind teaches us to rise above group norms, to think independently, and to mindfully rely only on our permanent immersion in what Ernest Holmes called the thing itself. Freedom to think creatively and vulnerably, and to question if the way of the group is the way we wish to go, are hallmarks of being a metaphysician. In today's fast-paced world of social media, influencers, and trends, we must be mindful of what we allow to shape us. Rather than go the way prescribed for us by others, let us nurture and appreciate the divine within, which is not and cannot be defined by the world. Mindfulness practices to nurture vulnerability could include any one of the 8 spiritual methods taught in Centers for Spiritual Living. And then he lists these, but these are what I may have to repeat. This is the first one. Spiritual mind treatment as one of our 8 spiritual methods. consciously directs the creative process. And I think that Reverend John's class is teaching spiritual mind treatment right now. And next is practice the presence, quiet the mind, and strengthen awareness of our unique creativity. And I think that speaks for itself. Next, direct revelation. Allow ultimate reality to flow through us as new ideas and positive self-talk. Let's see. That makes sense, yes. Okay, good. Self-awareness. Remain conscious of our own motives, self-talk, and beliefs, and separate them from the voices of the multitudes. Now, gratitude. Develop a life-affirming attitude and celebrate our uniqueness. Compassion. Claim the same good for others that we accept for ourselves. Intentional manifestation. Consciously bring about a greater good for ourselves and all beings. Okay. Sacred study. Expand our understanding of the one infinite reality as the self within. And that's it. And I think that took me 2 readings of them at least to get that. As our founder, Holmes, encouraged us, we must have faith in the self, the spark that burns at the center of our soul, and to think of it as divine. That spark, he taught, is caught from the living and eternal flame of the Spirit and can be trusted. May you be free to express what the divine has created as you. And so that is that. And I think the magazines are for sale for donation. And they're there. And now it is time for us to read the affirmation for April. It's on your insert in red at the top, under the yellow. Okay. I embrace my unique expression through a perfect balance of vulnerability and healthful boundaries. Now, wonderful music.
Morning, everybody. Good morning, everyone at home. Thank you for joining us, regardless of how you showed up today, in the wall or in the camera or here. Thank you. Faith is knowing that there is a lawn out there and we will someday walk upon it. You know, even up until about 2 weeks ago, I was just so sure, you know, we talk about, we get so full of ourselves with affirmations and our knowingness. I just knew we're going to have an Easter egg hunt on Easter for the kids. And by this week, I was really sure that my affirmations fell flat. And, well, in fact, our roof reached a critical point and we had to have like an emergency shoveling. So that's why so basically what you look at now is what the people on the Titanic saw before they hit the iceberg. So it will go sooner or later, and next week is supposed to be 50 degrees, so we may be like rowing in here within a couple weeks. But of course, next week is Easter. Today, if you were raised in any Christian atmosphere, you know that it's Palm Sunday. We're not a Christian denomination, but we borrow shamelessly of metaphors and larger ideas from all spiritual paths. And so we'll do a little bit of that today because we can, and we can look at things in our own way. And people will ask me, like someone today, what is it about Palm Sunday? What is it? Again, we look at it differently. But this whole season, the 40 days of leading up to Easter, as we've talked about quite a bit, is this idea that we can have a time of, rest or silence within ourselves and ask ourselves, what's next? What do I need to release and let go? How can I make room for something new? And how can I start that walk of of faith of not seeing really more than a couple steps ahead of me as I feel a little bit called to make some changes. And as we've talked about the last few weeks, sometimes we are in big change moments of our lives. Everything's up for change. And other times we're just in the constant letting go and things changing where they may be changing to a point that you're not fully aware on a day-to-day basis until you look back a couple months and go, yeah, big change. So let's talk just a little bit of Palm Sunday and how this fits in with change and transformation and some of the symbology of Palm Sunday. So Palm Sunday, again, this is the Cripps notes, the little bullet points. Jesus came into Jerusalem and he was greeted like he was, they saw him as a political leader and that he was going to be the guy to overthrow the Romans and all that, and they thought he would be their earthly king. And so they were greeting him, much like in a parade, with palm fronds. And I guess that's a cultural thing, that you would have palms and wave like this. So that's why it's called Palm Sunday. And if you go to a Catholic church today, I think they still do this. I haven't done this in a while. But they will hand you little bits of palms. And I used to love that as a kid. Anytime they'd hand out anything at the door, I just loved that as a kid. It was kind of like Bat Day at Dodger Stadium. You got something for just coming in the door. And I just loved that. But anyways, you would have that, and it was a remembrance of this time throughout the year. But what a lot of people didn't realize is that there was a larger symbolism of those little palms. That 40 days previous to Easter is something we call Ash Wednesday, which a lot of people are kind of confused what that is. If you, again, I was raised Catholic, so I know about this. You go to a church service on Wednesday, Ash Wednesday, and you go to the communion rail. Instead of having communion, the priest will smudge a little dirt on your forehead, and it's a sacred thing. And it's the ash is to symbolize, as you were going into a time of renewal, that all things eventually turn to ash. But here's kind of the how this works in a circular form. They get that ash by saving the palms from the previous year and incinerating them. And so as you are on Ash Wednesday, those ashes are from, again, the palms that you received the previous year. So it just shows this cycle of birth and death, of great transformation. Think of a plant, a palm, and palm trees and how amazing they are. And as magnificent as a palm tree might be, at some point, like all things, it will be ash. I mean, isn't that I kind of like that, actually. I like the cycle of it all and how you're reminded of those cycles. And so this is a time of year we can use these symbols, metaphors for our own transformations and looking at what kind of inner cleanup might we want to do. What are we ready to let go of? And as Anne pointed out, our theme for this month and a bit for today is this idea of being open or vulnerable to change. Vulnerability is an awkward word, isn't it? No? Who wants to be vulnerable? I mean, it almost feels like I need to put up a security system or we'll be vulnerable. On our house. We had to put up a video doorbell because there was a couple things happening in our neighborhood. It's just like, so we know who's up to what kind of a thing. So vulnerable, it feels a little, vulnerable. On an emotional thing of, gosh, if I let down, my mask or whatever I have, and I show who I really am, will people really like that? Haven't we all in different situations been like that? We kind of bring a different version of ourselves to the workplace, to our good friends, to our family, going around town. We adjust a little bit. So vulnerability would be, well, what if I just show up consistently as who I am? And that can be a little scary too. But I really like to almost use other words with it. I see it as being receptive, is lowering the walls so that that we can receive, in a sense, and not just things, but receive insight. It's so interesting in the reading I did this week. It was talking about how we often, in some form, we are praying or affirming or desiring in some form the light to come into our lives. I mean, light is a symbol, like good things to come in our lives, illumination to come into our lives, good ideas to come into our lives, good fortune for our family to come into our lives. And we see that as a sense of a light coming in. But as this chapter that I was reading pointed out, that no sooner does it start to show up that we go hide under the table. It's like, oh, that's really kind of frightening. What I asked for is showing up. And who thought that would happen, sort of thing. Or often when we get what appears to be answered prayer, we're like, do I get another choice? Can this be multiple choice? That we open up just so much to receive, and as something starts to come in, it freaks us out a little bit. So that's one thing in this whole process of leading up to Easter and the symbolism of transformation is to really kind of settle into that idea of what would I like to open to receive. And I'm not just saying your list of items you want from the mall, but what are you ready, how are you ready to shift? How are you ready to open up to something different on some level? And to be vulnerable enough to receive it as it starts to show up, as opposed to running for the exits because it's a little too scary. Again, nothing scarier than getting what we asked for sometimes. So to look at it in that way. So what's a good practice of vulnerability and receptibility? Think of it. And also in that, to think, well, what is it that I want to open up to and be a part of? And vulnerability, in a sense, not only opens us up to things that we may have been pushing away, it opens up things that may have been kind of below the surface a little bit, that we haven't wanted to look at, that we've kind of hid from, that will change the subject rather than face within ourselves. So vulnerability is also the willingness to look just beneath the surface. And as anyone who read my blog this week, pairing this idea of vulnerability and receptivity with what I call permeable boundaries. Permeable meaning that, it's funny how boundaries, we always say, well, we need boundaries because bad things can happen. In other words, it's like the anti-vulnerability sort of thing. But none of us were meant to walk around with a cement casing around us as we go down the street or through our lives. They were meant to be like, no, we know what should come in and out in our lives, and these boundaries should be, in a sense, permeable, meaning that we don't get so scared that we're just like this. So think of it as being vulnerable, being open to receive, and permeable boundaries. And like I said, we all know them when it's time when, I don't know, something is just not right for us. And we just say, well, let's put the brakes on that, but not be closed up. So what's a good process for this? A process that we use in Centered Spiritual Living that some of you have taken part of is a process of visioning. And when you say visioning, it almost sounds like this big mystical, weird woo-woo kind of thing. Basically what it is a facilitated process where instead of trying to come up with our own ideas of what we should be up to, we put that aside, in a sense, ask Spirit or the divine or the universe, basically, what is your thoughts on this? Knowing that we are connected to all things, what should I open myself up to, in a sense, be vulnerable or receptive in an idea that I have meant possibly be pushing away? It's interesting how we've done this in groups for different things. Usually we'll do a leadership day retreat in May, And we have our leadership council as well as past council members, and it's open to anyone who wants to be a part of it. And it's usually like much of a Saturday. And over the years, it's interesting how, as humans, we approach this. We're resistant to letting down our resistance. That makes any sense. That, first of all, as Westerners, we are overachievers in that if we say that we are having a facilitation to open up to a divine idea to come up with, we're really stressed about what if I don't get anything. It's like we instantly think that, okay, the channel is open and I should have a direct dictation right now in this first 10 minutes of amazing, wonderful ideas that will change our life as we know it here at Light in the Mountains. And again, it can be frustrating. It's just, I can see the people with, what they're emotionally going through. So it's like, I've got to come up with something here, kind of thing. And maybe that almost sense of relief when, oh, I finally got an idea. And that's not really, let's say, a true receptibility. There is, again, a bit of angst of not getting the right idea or ideas. But it is a process where I try to encourage people to relax with it. That, in fact, that it is setting out an invitation to the universe whose response might be delayed. In fact, more often than not, it is delayed. That when we are just like pen and paper, like, gosh, I have to come up with something, that usually is the time when it will not happen. But a true visioning as a lifestyle, it's great when we come together for a specific purpose, but as a lifestyle, it is constantly putting out this invitation to say, what is my next step? What should I be opening myself up to? For those who have not done a visioning process that is facilitated, there's 4 or 5 open questions that the facilitator will ask in a meditative state, and you'll have the opportunity to do some notes for it. And again, the first question is simply, what is Spirit's idea for my life right now? Or if we're doing this for Light in the Mountains, what is Spirit's idea for Light in the Mountains? And to try to get to a point of receptivity and to listen. And one of the reasons why it can be difficult for us is that in the Western world, we are not usually trained in our spiritual practices and our religions of our upbringing to listen. We are trained to speak. We are asked, so even in metaphysics, get an affirmation, make it clear, state what you want, write it everywhere, say it often, put it under your refrigerator, put it on your dashboard in your car. It's like I said, we are speaking so much that Spirit is like, I can't even get a word in edgewise here. I mean, they're just like affirming all over the place, and it's always different, and it's this, and then now they want this to be this, and now they want the other to be the other, and it's like, have you ever had a conversation with someone and you're like waiting for them to come up to air just so you could give a response? Kind of like, okay, I know they're going to either pass out because they're not coming up for air, or they eventually will come up for air. And I would imagine, we don't see a supreme being as this guy on a cloud somewhere, but there is a presence or a creative source in the universe, and I would imagine it's almost the same way. It's like, I just can't, I can't give my input here. They just won't give it up. There are just like, it has to be this way because we're taught that make an affirmation, make it clear, make it detailed, really go and all the time, visualize it the whole time. You're like walking around with this affirmation in your head. It's like it's got to, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Like, my lawn one still hasn't worked all that well. Maybe it will this week. But so in this case, rather, it's saying, I am willing to be vulnerable and be open to a different idea. I'm willing to be vulnerable and open to something that I never gave a consideration to before. I'm willing to be vulnerable and even consider something that kind of scared me a little bit. In fact, I think true manifestation from the divine in your life always comes with a little bit of, ooh, that's scary. That's stepping over the line. That's something I never gave myself permission to do a little bit. So I kind of think it's a divine idea when it's just a little scary. So that's the first part of this practice of visioning, is just asking, what do you think, basically? Universe, spirit, divine, what do you think? And to be ready to get answers when you least expect it. A second question in visioning is, what do I need to embrace more in my life to bring this through? This is simple in that, it's funny, as humans forming things of what we want or what we think we should have, again, we start thinking of things very physical. Like, oh yes, divine, tell me my next job or my next house or something like that. But when we say what I want to embrace, is usually we think of it as, what spiritual quality is at the core of what you need to open the door of your life to? What spiritual quality? That might be of faith, of love, of understanding, of peace. What is at the core of that you just really need to let down your barriers and allow to rush in? Because we often think of a manifestation in our life of things and circumstances, and we think of it as almost like an Excel spreadsheet. If I do A, B, C, and D, this will happen. And to a certain extent, that is true in the physical world. But at the core of this is a deeper idea, a spiritual quality that you may have put a boundary in your life to keep away from you. So visioning often is less about what's the thing I need to do and what's the thing that I need to let in. And of course, these are things that you just don't spend 10 minutes on. You allow there to be an ongoing conversation with the divine in your daily life, in your brain. It may start with a spiritual practice in the morning and a meditation. We think that, okay, 10 minutes, no more, no less. I'm off going at 7 to 7:10, and then I'm done with spirit for the rest of the day. I put in my time, and it was excruciating. I thought that timer would never go off, and oh my God, all I could think about is my list for the day. It's just the opening thing for the day. Basically, you can start your day with just saying, I'm here, I'm ready, I'm open. Talk to me, and go about your business. Stop having the thing fretting like, oh, what do I do on the prayer cushion? Do I light a candle? Do I mantra? Do I throw something over my shoulder to make it work? No, you basically just says, I'm here, I'm open, and I'm available to listen. I'm open for business with spirit. That's it. I'm open for business. And I'm willing to take in what is sent my way from that higher sense of consciousness, and I accept that it may not show up this morning as I'm on my 10 minutes here, that it may very well likely kind of hit me as I'm going out to my car to get into my car, or walking my dog, or going up, skiing, or any other thing, that it will kind of hit you when you least expect it. So basically, your morning meditation, whether it's 2 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever, just say, no, I'm open for business. I'm ready to receive, and at your convenience, not mine. That's it. That even sounds a little scary. It's like, but what if I'm doing something really important? What a better time I can't think of to get a little bit of divine inspiration, really. So, on its schedule, not your schedule. Third part of this, which gets a little bit more complicated in the visioning facilitation, is in this greater idea of your life, and again, you may not have even put a label on it. You might not even have an indication, even energetically, what that is yet. You're just beginning this process. You ask this question, and so what do I need to let go? So basically in here, you are balancing palm fronds and ashes. The ashes are, what do I need to let go? What have I possibly been hoarding in my closet, metaphorically, that it's time to go? What have I said that, gee, I really am so open to shifting and transformation in my life, but don't touch this. Whatever you, in fact, I'm going to put those orange cones around here. Spirit, whatever you do, stay away from here. Because this is like, I can't even get into it. We're not going to go there. We're just going to leave it there. That's usually the big thing you need to let go. And we often will do that in minor ways. It's just like, well, you know, I'm going to let it go, and I'll just kind of look this way and go around it. And see, you know, I was so open that, you know, I walked right by it. But I was so sly and kind of, because I know its boundaries. I know it's right there. I know where the cones are. I've placed them. They've been there for decades. So in this visioning life process where it is a day-to-day thing, is to allow yourself to lower those permeable boundaries, to be receptive, and say this thing that is kind of like become a security blanket. As I said to Spirit, anything, I'm up for anything. It's okay if that goes. Now, if you truly release it, it may go. It may stay in a different form. It may stay and you're like, it has no power over you anymore. Any numbers of things, but it doesn't have that place that it was in your life. And it could be a bad feeling against someone else. It could be holding on to something that happened to you 30 years ago. It could be this idea of, I would like to move forward in this area, but if it doesn't happen 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it's not going to happen. And you let go of the idea that it has to have a certain sequence. It can be any number of things in this visioning process. And this is so applicable not for just we as individuals, but we come across this as we do things for groups, like for Light of the Mountains. This is like the sacred cows when people have been doing spiritual community together for 30 years. It's like, oh, yes, we are open at the top. We're going to do anything, but you're not going to get rid of that, are you? And that's how it really shows up. It's like, yeah, we're here for something new and this. Oh, good, then I can get rid of this. Oh, no, you can't get rid of that. So notice what you come up against that you think, yes, I'm open for transformation in my life. Oh, this thing, Easter is coming. I'm rolling away the stone. That's another metaphor for next week. But, but you think, oh, but this thing is still going to stay here. So be aware this week, especially we're working up to the climatic finish next week. Big transformation. But staying with Palm Sunday, here's the other great metaphor with this. And again, those who were raised in any sort of Christian background will understand it. It's like the way Jesus started this week is completely different than everybody thought it was going to end up. You remember, really? And the midweek was really rough, without going into details. And I would imagine anyone who had the palm fronds in a million years didn't anticipate how the week was going to go. Because not only was it about Jesus and what was going on with him, anyone who was a supporter of him literally ran for their life. It was like, you know, the energy has shifted here. It's no longer good to be associated with him, so let's go to our summer home somewhere, or you know what I mean. It's just like things turned out differently along the way, but the transformation at the end was so much more than anyone anticipated at the same time. So as we are in this visioning process of our life, of letting go, of being receptive, of being vulnerable, to know that it may not happen in the sequence that you might have hoped. Things will happen along the way that were amazing gifts that you didn't anticipate, and things, potholes in the road that you never anticipated. But as we stick with it, amazing things happen. And I don't mean that our life is quote unquote picket fence perfect. It just feels like we have made the appropriate steps to the next appropriate vision and form of our life. and to know this is that the journey never ends. We like to think, haven't we at different parts of my life, if I only get these like 10 things, I'm great. Remember in the 80s, a couple friends of mine, married couple, they said, when we were raising our kids in about 1970, we thought, if our combined incomes ever reached $18,000, we'd be set for life. And they kind of chuckled at themselves. Even with inflation, I don't think that would be that much right now. But we kind of think that I will arrive at some point. I will arrive at Easter and we're done. But you're not. Remember the ashes and the palm fronds. It's a continual cycle. It never ends. I like to think, as Ernest Holmes said, it's a spiral upward, meaning in growth and consciousness, but it is a spiral that never ends. So I just want to close today with a little quote from Ernest Holmes, and I think it might have been in the magazine, and on vulnerability. It says, when we establish within our thought a non-resistance to that power which is greater than we are at the same time accepting within ourselves a stability that is the stability of the universe. We find ourselves secure, for we know that we are part of that which causes change, but is never affected by any of those changes. So let's just sit with that and go within. And let us sit with our openness to transform. As we symbolically go through this, what is called as Holy Week or Easter Week, let us go deeper within and ask Spirit, what do you have in mind? Let us open our receptivity. Let us go to greater levels of vulnerability and openness. Let us release what no longer serves us or may have never served us as we step forward into the next step of who we are and what we are experiencing. So we give thanks for this, and as we give thanks for this, we release this, we let it go, we release attachment to how it needs to show up in the world. We simply say, I'm here, I'm ready, let it happen. And so it is.